we are going to rotate a figure 90 degrees clockwise about the origin. I'd like to take a minute to discuss the coordinate grid and talk about its 4 quadrants. Notice the quadrants of the coordinate grid are labeled in a counterclockwise manner. We start here in the upper right-hand corner with quadrant 1, and then we move to the upper left-hand corner, quadrant 2. Down is beneath is quadrant 3, and here is quadrant 4. And the quadrants are labeled in a counterclockwise manner. In quadrant 1, both the x and y values are positive because all points in quadrant 1 are to the right and above the origin. In quadrant 2, all the x values are negative and the y values are positive because all points in quadrant 2 are to the left and above the origin. In quadrant 3, the x and y values are both negative because all points in quadrant 3 are to the left and beneath the origin. And finally, in quadrant 4, the x values are positive and the y value are negative because all points in quadrant 4 are to the right and beneath the origin. So when we think about rotating 90 degrees clockwise, that means that this pre-image, when it's rotated 90 degrees clockwise, all of these points that are in quadrant 1, which have both a positive x and y value, are now going to move into quadrant 4. That is a clockwise rotation. What's in quadrant 1 moves to quadrant 4. That means my new vertices are going to have a positive x value and a negative y value. If we're moving from quadrant 1, where our pre-image, all of our vertices had positive x and positive y, and we're moving into quadrant 4, our x values are going to be positive, but all of our y values will be negative. Keep that in mind as we go through this. So let's take a look at our directions. Draw a circle centered at the center of rotation, which is the origin, such that one of the vertices of the figure is on the circle. So clearly this is a triangle. It has 3 vertices. Here's 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're going to click on the origin and we're going to create a circle. And we want that little yellow point to line up with one of our vertices. Does not matter which one. Step 2. Click and drag to draw a line through the yellow center and the vertex on a circle. So here's our vertex on the circle. Here's our yellow center. I want to click and drag a line through those 2 points. Now draw a line through the yellow center that is perpendicular to the line that you just drew. Well, we know that perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. The slope of this line is rise 1, run 4, in a positive direction. So the slope of this line is positive 1/4. The opposite reciprocal of that is negative 4/1. So from the origin, I'm going to go up 4 and left 1 in the opposite direction of our line that's already drawn. Up 4, left 1. And voila, I just created a set of perpendicular lines. You can clearly see 4 right angles are formed between these 2 lines. We are going to rotate this figure 90 degrees in a clockwise fashion. If I take a look at this red dot and I was rotating it 90 degrees clockwise, I can easily see that this dot would rotate from here to here. So it goes from the first quadrant to the 4th quadrant. So let's take a look, see what happens. This is a 90 degrees clockwise about the origin rotation. Let's see that animation again. Okay, so now let's talk about what seems to be happening here to the points. My original point had coordinates 4, 1. Again, we're in quadrant 1, so the x and y values are both positive. The new point, after it was rotated 90 degrees clockwise about the origin, has coordinates 1, -4. Again, in this case, all points in the 4th quadrant have a negative y value. That's why that is a negative. Let's take a look at that animation one more time. So this point here landed right here. Originally, it was 6, 2, and now notice it lands at 2, -6. And again, all points in the 4th quadrant have a positive x and a negative y. And I hope you see a little pattern here. If the pre-image was 4, 1, its image, the x and y's have been swapped, and the sign of the x and y values depend on which quadrant the image is located in. So the 4, 1 gets swapped to 1, 4, and then because the point is in quadrant 4, we know all y values have to be negative. And if you see, this point here was rotated to right here, and the coordinates of this point are 4, -4. And let's just check out that rotation one last time. And let's check our work, and we are correct. We did a great job. So let's submit our answer. And yes, we're positive we would like to submit. And here again, we see a 90-degree clockwise rotation about the origin. And hopefully what we've learned is in a 90-degree rotation, the x and y values get swapped, and the sign of the x and y values depend on which quadrant the image is located.